fine.
Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of What's Going On. I'm your host Tom D'Ambra. As always, we're very thankful you take the time from your busy day to view our program. My friends, I want to thank you for your patience. We have been having to run for the last 7 to 8 weeks reruns because I had a little medical issue going on, a very painful medical issue, but I will tell you that my heart is in more agony than the surgical spot that I had to have medical procedures done. A tremendous amount has gone on in the world since these last 9 weeks that I've been gone. And by the grace of God, we have not stepped into World War III. We have seen the very unfortunate murder of a patriot in Oregon. And we have also lost a prestige, dedicated patriot who you have probably never heard of, even though he dedicated his life to your liberty. He died in a prison cell held in by the feds, and his name was Irwin Schiff. And before we get into all that, I want to read an article from the American Free Press. And basically what's going on here, my friends, I had read to you many times over the years and explained to you many times over the years how everything is manipulated. We don't have money anymore, as you know. We have a Federal Reserve note, which is a debt instrument. As we've explained to you through the bankruptcy programs that we just reran, that basically you and your children are the co-sureties to a fiat debt. And now, unbelievably so, the Bank of America has actually come out and admitted that the central banks are, quote, rigging the equities game. And I would like to read this article to you. This is done by Ronald Ray. And I'm just going to jump right into this for the sake of time. I'm not going to read the whole thing because we have a tremendous amount of information to catch up on. Okay. Giving a sign that the plutocrats are preparing to eat their own, and they're doing that, Bank of America recently released a stunning and straightforward report which explains how the Federal Reserve Bank and other central banks around the world have rigged the equities market. In the United States, a corrupt Congress is also to blame, since it unconstitutionally gave the feds the task of not only controlling the nation's money supply, but also ensuring sufficient employment and maintaining balance in the stock, bond, and commodities markets. The Fed has deliberately, we would say, failed in its mandate, seeking only the enrichment of its private member banks like Goldman Sachs and the Rothschilds' financial banking empire and others. According to Benjamin Bowler, chief of Bank of America's Global Equity Derivatives Research, in a December 9th, 2015 report entitled "Fragility is the New Volatility," the year since the 2008 international financial collapse has been unprecedented central bank interventions in the market. A monstrous manipulation of such proportions that the banksters have, in fact, quote unquote, broken the market. Bowler writes, essentially central banks, by unfairly inflating asset prices, have compressed risk like a spring to unfairly tight levels. Unfortunately, the market is aware that the price of risk is not correct, but they can't fight it, and everyone is forced to crowd into the same trade. By manipulating the markets, they have also reduced the investor's inherent conviction by rendering fundamentals less relevant. In plain English, the central bankers have created money out of thin air to provide too easy credit, and even secretly bought up stocks, bonds, and commodities in order to prop up an otherwise collapsing market. The market is a fraud because real profits do not exist in too many companies, especially the largest. My friends, that statement is from the person in charge of the derivatives market for the Bank of America. He is telling you the whole thing is a rigged game, and he is telling you that basically what we have been telling you for the last 6 or 7 years. that what is going on is that these companies are buying their own stock options to raise the price of the stock. Do you understand what I'm saying? They are creating a demand on their own stock by purchasing their own stock. Do you remember how when we reported to you that China, Saudi Arabia, Japan, and others are no longer buying Federal Reserve or Treasury bonds? So what's taking place? The Federal Reserve is buying 74% of the Treasury bonds to keep the ship afloat. Who do you think is going to be liable for the debt of all these bonds? You and I. We're the co-surety. So not only are they profiting all the way up, they're profiting all the way down, and we are being stuck with the bill, and future generations of our children are being stuck with the bills. And you have to remember, my friends, just like what he's talking about here during 2008, when they got 28.3 trillion, that's trillion tango, dollars. Of course, if you've been watching this program, you know we do not have dollars anymore. We have Federal Reserve notes. But what they have done with this is basically when they got $28.3 trillion with no accountability, you and I have to pay an interest bond due on each and every bit of that $28.3 trillion because the bankers gave us permission to print it to give to them in the first place. And this is just what's going on today. All they did, my friends, is they got richer and richer and richer back in 2008 with the 28.3 trillion, and now they've kicked the can down the road, but now there's nothing more they can do. It's endgame. And now they are selling the assets of the United States, and we got into this with executive orders some years ago, and this is, my friends, comes right back looped around to what's going on in Oregon. This has to do with Agenda 21 and the collateralization of minerals in this country. But let's continue with this article. The illusion of prosperity is created in this case by the central bank's continuing injection of credit, and listen to this, and purchases of its own equities. This money artificially inflates prices and balance sheets. The manipulation has radically destabilized the markets and created a nightmare scenario. Too much liquidity, cash or credit, from the central banks has caused, and listen to this, an artificial reduction or compression of risk and forced crowding of investors into the same trade. This compression and crowding in turn ignores the importance of companies' fundamental worth and profitability. And you want to know why, my friends? Because there isn't any profitability and there is no worth. If this was a true laissez-faire market, this would have crashed decades ago. But they've got the American people ignorant, apathetic, entertained. You sign your children off as a birth certificate, which is a bond. And now, for the rest of your life and the rest of your children's lives and your grandchildren's lives, they are going to be the surety. They are going to be economic slaves to debt because of this. And what have you done about it? What have you done about it? Nothing. You've done nothing. You have some very courageous and brave people who have tried. And what happens to them? They get gunned down by agents of the international bankers while their hands are up. What happens to them? They wind up in federal prisons like Irwin Schiff did for the rest of his life and died in a federal prison. Let us continue with this article. Consequently, the significant market event can trigger a panic sell-off, a flash crash. When investors realize that the central banks are still there to manipulate the market and provide, listen to this, illusionary stability, those with money left all pile back in, sometimes even with greater violence. This market fragility provides a new and dangerous volatility to the markets, to the point where they no longer operate according to previous fundamental norms. There are no fundamental norms, my friends. This whole thing is a rigged game. Why do you think your sons and daughters are going off to various countries throughout the world to murder and mayhem? You bleed, we bleed, they profit. And you still get stuck with the bill for generations. And what have you done about it? Nothing. Think of this as an accident, or that big banking is an innocent bystander. Think again. Listen to this statement. A J.P. Morgan private banker declared, "Mission accomplished. Quantitative easing dries up equity valuations." What is he talking about? He is talking about the trillions of dollars that they have put in the market to buy stocks and equities and bonds, to put a facade debt demand on these equities and bonds. So you would have the illusion, because you think that the stock market is linked, Wall Street stock market is linked to Main Street. It's not. It should be obvious to you no, it's not. But that whole thing is a facade. So they put in trillions and trillions of dollars to buy up these equities, to buy up these bonds, so there would be a fake demand to raise the price and at least stabilize the price. Who, again, is going to be due for this debt? You and I and your children. And what have you done about it? Nothing. You've done nothing. You know, America, we are right where we deserve. We are completely indentured servants or slaves to debt. We are a conquered nation. You do not own your land. Senate Document 43 tells you flat out from the bankruptcy of March 9th, 1933, that all land is in the state and subordinate to the necessities of the state. You don't own anything, folks. Property is property is property. You don't even own your children. You signed them off as a bond. You made them a commercial entity. And what have you done about it? Nothing. Let us continue. So according to this J.P. Morgan private banker, mission accomplished. Quantitative easing dries up equity valuations. That is, the central banks have inflated the equities market in order to fool investors into throwing good money after bad. Algorithmic trading by mega banks and traders then forces out the little guy and robs him of his money. This is a commonplace occurrence. The bankers have broken the market. One honest equities fund, Nevsky Capital, confirmed this publicly and drew correct conclusions, recently closing down. The chief investment officer, Martin Taylor, stated, "Truly, to mix metaphors, butterflies flapping their wings now regularly create hurricanes that stamp out fundamentally driven investors who cannot remain solvent longer than the market can remain irrational." Unable to make money, the fund returns its investors cash. Now, my friends, if you remember last year, we had a bunch of quotes from them people. A bunch of quotes about how the market is being rigged and how they refuse to participate in it. Add to all this exorbitant fees charged to investors, especially to pension funds by hedge funds and private equity firms, and a trifecta of avarice appears, designed to impoverish the masses and starve them in their old age. The usury industry. You know, when I read that, I said that's perfect. Because that's exactly what bankers and government is. It's usury industry. Banking's true name is like some inescapable, bottomless, primeval tar pit. The financial pharaohs suck down more and more of the world's wealth for the enrichment of the privileged few. Their greed now has reached such proportions that entire industries, economies, and nations are threatened. It is not only immoral, it is criminal. With the derivatives investments more out of control than ever, a new year of a swiftly imploding stock market, and Christine Lagarde, now if you don't know who she is, she's the president of the International Monetary Fund, along with J.P. Morgan Chase and others, signaling a world economic slowdown, a global disaster now looms. No worries for the bureaucratic pharaohs, though. When their Ponzi schemes collapse, they will simply seize depositors' money for themselves in legislatively enabled bail-ins. The little guy, though, should prepare for the impending financial Armageddon and societal collapse. It is time to end the horrible scourge of usury and fractional reserve banking. Time to end the Fed and all central banks. Time to restore constitutional money. Time for a return to a more self-sufficient lifestyle. I'm going to stop here on this article for the sake of time. My friends, I'm going to tell you right now, societal collapse is coming. It's in their plans. It's in their white papers. We read this to you years ago. But the very next page from the American Free Press, what do we see? That the Congress approved a $211 billion credit line for the International Monetary Fund. Here we are on one page. The whole thing is rigged. The whole thing's a facade. The whole thing is a complete rigged game. Next page. Congress just gave the bankers $211 more billion of your money. I shouldn't say your money. You don't have any money. They took all your money. There is no gold. There is no silver backing your intrinsic valued commodity. No, it is an instrument of debt. That's why there's two signatories on that debt. One is the creditor, one is the debtor. Federal Reserve note. What is a note? An acknowledgement of debt. Who do you think is the surety to that debt, my friends? You and I and your children. So they just got another $211 billion from you. Did you have any say in this? What happened to your Republican Congress? What a facade, huh? There is no difference, my friends. So, my friends, we ask ourselves, why is there no prosecution? Why is nobody going to jail? Well, you and I will go to jail if we, don't dot our I's or cross our T's. But I mean the real criminals. The ones that have the biggest robbery in the history of man. How come none of these people are going to jail? In doing some research, I was studying some papers, some internal documents of the International Monetary Fund that have been passed by the United Nations. And I want you to listen to this. This is section 1, purpose of article. Now this is all from the International Monetary Fund's internal documents. To enable the fund to fulfill the functions of which it is entrusted, the status, immunities, and privileges set forth in this article shall be accorded to the fund in its territories of each member. Oh, beware their territory. We're going to get into that in a minute. And you thought you lived in a sovereign state. You fool! You live in territories of international banksters. That's why the federal government is involved in all what you think is perceived as to be the states. Remember, the federal government, according to the United States Constitution, can be involved in enclaves, territories, and districts only, not the states. But you live in a district. Federally, if you live in New England, you're in Federal District Zone 1. That's why you use a zip code. It is a federal district. Let's continue. Section 2, status of the fund. The fund shall possess full jurisdictional personality, and in particular the capacity to 1. Contract, 2. To acquire and dispose of immovable and movable property. Are you listening to what they're just doing here? To acquire and or dispose of immovable or movable property. So they can take what they want and they can dispose of they want, whether the property is stationary or whether it has 2 feet and can move. Do you get my point? Number 3, to institute legal proceedings. Section 3. Now listen to these words. Immunity from judicial process. The fund, its property, and its assets and personnel, wherever located and by whomsoever held, shall enjoy immunity from any and every form of judicial process, except to the extent that it is expressly waives its immunity for the purpose of any proceedings or by the terms of any contract. Swipe of a pen, we make ourselves completely worry-free. We've given ourselves, I'm talking about them, have given themselves permission to rob you, and there's nothing that you can do with your little Constitution paperwork. George Bush was right, my friends. The Constitution is just a GD piece of paper. It has no law and in effect. You want me to read that again to you, or do you get the understanding that we do not have the jurisdiction to go after these people legally? They gave themselves permission not to. Your representative Congress signed off on it. Section 4, immunity from any other action. Property and all its access of the funds. Excuse me. Let me have some chaga here, my friends. Another healthy benefit they don't want you to know about, because then if you drank another chaga, you wouldn't be running to the pharmaceutical companies for their profits. Oh, whatever you do, don't drink raw milk, because organic raw milk, that's the worst thing in the world you can do. But drink fluorinated water. That's really good for you. Section 4, immunity from other action. Property and assets of the fund, wherever located and by whomsoever held, shall be immune, listen to this now, from search, requisition, confiscation, exportation, or any other form of seizure by the executive or any legislative action. So not only can you not put them or prosecute them and put them in prison, you can't even lien their properties. You can't acquire assets for redemption. You wonder why no one's going to prison. Well, you and I are, but not them. Section 5, immunity of archives. The archives of this fund shall be inviolable. You know what that means? That you can't go in and do your research. They are not open to public scrutiny. Let us continue. Section 6, freedom of assets from restrictions. To the extent necessary to carry out the activities provided for in this agreement, all property and assets of the fund shall be free from any restrictions, regulations, controls, or moratoria of any nature. How come you don't have this contract? Let us continue. Section 7, privilege for communications. The official communications of the fund shall be accorded by members, the same treatment as the official communications of all members. Can't go into their communities, into their communications. Section 8, immunity and privileges of officers and all employees. All governors, executive directors, alternates, members of the committees, representatives appointed under Article Section 3, advisors of any of the foregoing persons, officers, employees of the fund, 1, shall be immune from any legal process with respect to acts performed by them in their official capacity, except when the fund waives this immunity. 2, not being local nationals, shall be granted the same immunities from immigration restrictions, alien registration requirements, and national service obligations, and the same facilities as regards exchange restrictions as are accorded by members to the representatives, officials, employees of comparable rank of other members. It's, you know, folks, how much more do I have to read till you get the point? 3. Shall be granted the same treatment in respect to traveling facilities as is accorded by members of representative officials and employees of the comparable ranks of other members. Okay, so what have we got so far? You can't prosecute them personally. You can't lien their property. You can't read their communications, and none of their records are public. We can't go into them. Okay? So legally, they are completely enveloped themselves in an umbrella of protection. And they tax the living hell out of us, don't they? Do they pay taxes? Let's find out. Section 9. Immunity from taxation. A. The fund, its assets, property, personnel, income, and its operations and transactions authorized by this agreement shall be immune from all taxation and all custom duties. The fund shall also be immune from liability for the collection and payment of any tax or duty. B. No tax shall be leveled on or in respect to salaries and emoluments paid by the fund to any directors, executive directors, alternates, officers, employees of the fund, local subjects, or other local nationals. So, my friends, this is why you see the Congress just gave them another $211 billion, and they don't even have to go out and collect it from you. The bankers got their puppets collecting from us for them. They don't even have to do the paperwork. And what have you done about it? What have you done about it? Nothing. Let us continue. Note, I gotta go back to my spot here. No taxation of any kind shall be leveled on any obligation or security issued by the fund, including any dividend or interest earned by whomsoever held. Any which discriminates against such obligation or security solely because of its origin, or if the sole jurisdictional basis for such taxation is the place or currency in which it is to be issued, made, paid, or payable, or the location of any office or place of business maintained by the fund. Folks, you can't tax them personally. You can't tax their property. You can't tax their earnings. You don't even have the availability to know what their earnings are. Section 10. This is going to be my last one because for the sake of time. Each member shall take such action as is necessary in its own territories for the purpose of making effective terms of the law of the fund and the principles set forth. Like imprisoning patriots who try to teach you about the IRS code. Like murdering patriots in Oregon when their hands are up. Folks, you can't, this is what you've got, and this is their own document. And the reason why that I found that document, I was up late last night doing some research, and a former whistleblower of the IMF that I'm very familiar with, evidently is very sick, is dying from cancer, and released that. Now, do you understand where we are? You are chattel. And if you look up the word chattel, movable property which has been liened. And you think that these so-called elected representatives are representing you. They're not. They are not working in your behalf. They are working in the behalf of the international banksters. And the international banksters are about to collapse the entire world. And after we destroy each other and fight each other by proxy wars that these international bankers are setting up, and they will be domestic and foreign, then they will purchase the world for pennies. For pennies. They will bring in their SDR, special drawing rights. We will have a one world global currency, and it'll be cashless. And you will continue and sit there on your couch and wonder, gee, what happened to America? America is gone. We are a conquered people. We are a conquered nation. We are a conquered land. You have been declared the enemy. And I know for all of you who have been watching this program, and I thank you for your patience, but I will say it again. The 1933 Trading with the Enemies Act, when you look up the definition of enemy, it is citizens of the United States and all those under the jurisdiction of the United States. National Defense Authorization Act 12. This land has been declared a battleground. Your land is seized. Your sweat equity is seized. You have no intrinsic value backing what you think is money. You have a debt instrument in your pocket that you base your life on, that you and your children are going to be paying for the privilege of for eternity. Senate Document 43 with the bankruptcy. You do not own anything. You don't own your car. You don't own your land. You don't own the septic system you had to put in. That's why you have to go get permission from all these alphabet agencies to come and they inspect your land. Because if you owned it, wouldn't you tell them to get the hell out? Well, you don't own it. Now, I want to be really quick and talk about what's going on in Syria. And then I want to speak about Irwin Schiff and Lavoy Finnegan and what's going on in Oregon. My friends, on November 24th, this is right when I took ill, Turkey shot down a Su-24, so-called Russian Su-24, and Putin was very smart on this. And what he did was, when they found the black box, instead of just opening it for the world to see, he brought in representatives from various countries, and they didn't even open it until everybody was there. And then once they opened it up and they saw unequivocally that this plane never entered Turkish airspace. Putin has taken the high ground. What he has done is also expose the fact that the United States has, number one, not only been operating with ISIS or ISIL or Al-Qaeda, whatever you want to call it this week, but we've actually, well, let me see. We got a 4-star general, General Finney of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Now, if you don't know what the DIA is, that is the CIA of the military. Every bit of reconnaissance, every bit of information is brought into this agency at any level of the DOD and brought in and deciphered. And what did he come out and say? This 4-star general who is in charge of all this information. He publicly came out and said that the Obama administration originated, funded, and is training ISIS. The Russians have come out and said, we were never bombing any of the facilities or logistical support of ISIS. We were bombing military infrastructure of Syria and Iraq, which has been unequivocally proven to be accurate. In 5 days of Russia actually bombing ISIS, they had tremendous success. But what have they been bombing, my friends? See, Erdogan from Turkey and Obama had a sweet little deal going. It's called stolen oil. They were stealing oil from Syria and from Iraq, and they were trailing it up to Turkey. So what did Putin do? He's been bombing the logistical support centers of from the convoys of trucks to the transport facilities to the actual sites where they are drawing the oil from the ground. He's bombing it. He is hurting them in the pocketbook. He is exposed to the world the corrupted Obama administration. And you know what? It ain't just Obama. It's the whole ring-a-rang of the United States government, USA Inc. So your sons and daughters are over there bleeding in the Middle East because you think, we got to fight the bad guys here. Well, guess what, folks? We are the bad guys. We've been you got a 4-star general telling you publicly that we have initiated the whole process, funded the whole process, and trained the whole process. Folks, you don't, now we've got 1,500 shoulder-launched surface-to-air missiles that are missing. I can tell you where they're going to be. They're going to be in the United States, and they're going to be in Syria, and it won't be long before they're shooting down civilian airliners so they can have more fear factor for you, more Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution. So you can go back in your little coverage of fear. Because after all, folks, if you're an honest individual, you have to admit you live in fear of the United States government. You're afraid of them coming for you. You can see flat out that they are not afraid of showing you what they're about when they absolutely shoot an innocent man who has not been charged with anything, who posed no threat to them, never brandished a firearm, always showed his arms, and they shot him. Now, last night at 3:30 in the morning, it came over a website that I go to, and I'm not going to read it verbatim because it hasn't been released from the family that I'm aware of, but from according to this website, which in the past has been accurate, there were 9 bullets in Lavoy Finicum. 9. The first 2 entered his lower back and hip. The third one, they shot him right in the face. There are over 120 bullet holes in the vehicle that these people were driving. The reason when you watch the footage, when the white truck pulls over, they are sitting there waiting for the law enforcement. And whose laws are they enforcing? The bankers' laws. And by the way, if I could back up just a little bit and look this up, I don't have the time to get into it, but did you know that Eric Holder and a group of, when he was young, communist Marxists, actually took over a federal building? And he became Attorney General. And I want to ask you another question. What would have happened if a black youth who was burning down, or white youth, whatever color, burning down Ferguson, had his hands up and got shot in the face like that? There'd be riots in every city in the country. But they just shot some old redneck cowboy, according to what one black person said on the internet. Not their problem. Well, I got news for you. It is your problem. It's like that Catholic priest in Germany. When they came for the Unionists, I did nothing because I wasn't a Unionist. When they came for the homosexuals, I did nothing because I wasn't a homosexual. When they came for the Jews, I did nothing because I wasn't Jewish. And when they came for me, there was no one left to do anything. So you have to understand, my friends, what's going on in Syria and the reason why Assad has to go. Assad has to go. It's all you hear about. Just like Gaddafi had to go. Just like Hussein had to go. Why? Because control of money, currency, and oil and natural resources. My friends, if it wasn't for the patience of Vladimir Putin, we would be at World War III right now. And if you think you're not worried about the Russian military, you better think again. I invite you to look up the USS Donald Cook in the Black Sea. And you will see how one plane, through electromagnetic designed equipment, completely shut down one of the top Aegis destroyers of our fleet. Shut it down. Everything. They couldn't communicate. They couldn't even turn the lights on. The engines died. They had no navigational capacity, no communication capacity, no navigation capacity, nothing. Anything digital was shut down by one plane. If you read some of the Chinese documents, my friends, of the military, the reason why the United States, other countries are not trying to compete with the United States with regards to carriers is because, to put it in the word of the Chinese, at the appropriate time, they will be nothing but large sitting ducks. My friends, carriers are great. Of course, we sacrificed the battleships, so the Japanese had them all lined up pretty for them at Pearl Harbor, because we knew the battleship was going to be, archaic. The new technology of aviation was about to change the significance and the way in which naval warfare was to be taken and carried out. Well, the carriers are great, my friends, when you can pick on countries that don't have this kind of EMP technology. They're fine for Iraq, they're fine for Libya, they're fine for the Sudan, and Yemen, Mali, all these countries that we are invading and murdering by the millions and millions of people. What happens when the lights get turned off, folks? What happens when you can't watch them birds anymore? What happens when you can't navigate? What happens when you have no defense mechanisms, no radar, nothing to even know what's coming your way? The Russians, my friends, are way ahead of us in EMP warfare and also in missile technology. The world was shocked when the Russians launched a cruise missile from the Mediterranean Sea and it hit its target precisely in Syria. I don't know why they were, because you've been told that they're a rust bucket military. So let me tell you something. The last poll I've seen, Vladimir Putin had a 92% approval rating of its people. 2 weeks ago, the Congress of the United States had a 9% approval rating from the American people. So Putin has exposed the United States government for what it is. Cronies. Corrupted, bankster, puppet cronies. And for the sake of time, I am going to stop right here. I could get into this a lot more. I am hoping that the people of Turkey, number one, remove Erdogan from his office. But I also know this, that the United States has sent a tremendous amount of Muslim agent provocateurs throughout the different stans, if you would, of the old Soviet Republic. And I will tell you another thing which I was excited for is that one of the biggest agent provocateur groups funded by George Soros was thrown out of Russia and exposed for what they were. Now, the other thing I'd like to say about George Soros, you got Black Lives Matters, that whole organization, Black Lives Matters. I got to ask all you black people who are burning your own neighborhoods, why is it you're allowed to be taking your marching orders and funded from a white Anglo-Saxon former family Nazi, George Soros? That's right. You people are funded from a hateful white Anglo-Saxon former Nazi. His family was part of the Nazi empire. Look it up. Why are you taking marching orders from them? I'll tell you why. Because you're nothing but a pawn. You're nothing but a pawn. You're being used to divide this nation. Now, I want to stop here and let's get into a statement which I want to read to you. There's two statements actually, but I'm going to have to be quick about this because for the sake of time. But I want you to understand the sequence of events that took place with this shooting of Lavoy Finicum. There was two women in the front vehicle. There were two vehicles that were pulled over at the traffic stop. Now hold on, let's just break that language down, mainstream media. Traffic stop. Of course, we live in America. We've all had traffic stops. Of course, land of the free, ha ha ha. I mean, we've all been pulled over by the revenue agents to extract revenue from the serfs. But a traffic stop is okay, you have one cop, he issues you a contract, a ticket, actual contract, we won't go there, but he issues you a ticket, you go, you pay your extortion fee to the corporate cronies, and you go on. That's a traffic stop. But what happened here was there was roadblocks, there was snipers, there was full people in armament. This was an ambush, completely different. Now, where were the people going? These two vehicles, Bundy's, Lavoie, and others, they were going to meet with approximately 412 people, from what I'm reading, and the other sheriff in another county, because the other sheriff is very constitutional, unlike Sheriff Ward that was in Burns. But he was hoping that they could come to a negotiated, and they were working on this, and it was looking very good, that they would come to a negotiated, peaceful resolution. Then what got the Bundys and that whole group of people there to begin with was the double jeopardy of the Hammonds. Because what happened was they were lighting fires on their own property, and one of them went off the property and burned like 124 acres of federal land, which happens all the time. Of course, you watch the interviews with the locals, and there's scorched land, thousands of acres that the feds have burned by mistake. But we don't have time for that. So they went there to support the Hammonds. The Hammonds, according to people in their family, were completely intimidated by the feds and turned it down. And the Bundys then started doing research on basically what was going on with the Bureau of Land Management. And they discovered something very interesting, my friends. They discovered that there was a deal between the Bureau of Land Management, Hillary Clinton State Department, and a company called Uranium One, which was a parent company based out of Canada, which is a Russian parent company. And this contract was for the uranium ore that was on the Hammonds' ranch lands and also on other parts of the Mailer refuge. You understand what I'm saying? This is just like back in Bunkersville, Nevada, where they discovered Harry Reid and his son Raul were going to make $4 million because they had a contract deal on BLM land with the Chinese. Well, same thing here. And they started discovering these things through discoveries of records. And they started finding out about this corrupted federal judge, Grizzly. All this was coming to light. The sheriff in Burns didn't want anything to do with it. You know why? And I'm speculating here. I'm sure he was on the take also. The judge certainly is. The mayor certainly is. All these state officials are. Uranium One was making contributions to the Clinton Foundation to the tunes of $400,000 and $500,000 at a whack. This is what it was about. You didn't hear about this in mainstream media, did you? So then they started to bring this to light, and the other sheriff said, we're going to meet, we're going to discuss this, we're going to try to get this out in the limelight, we're going to try to come to a peaceful resolution. They could not have that. The bankers could not have that. So they got the FBI, Oregon State Police, and we don't even know who else was in these uniforms. We don't even really know if there was Americans in these uniforms. And the purpose of the trip, Ammon Bundy and his companions were on their way to meet with the sheriff from a nearby John Day and community with local ranchers who stood in support of their cause. Music and festivals were also on the order of the day. As a matter of fact, the 18-year-old girl that was there, Victoria Sharp, was to be one of the singers. First encounter. I have to be quick here because of time, my friends. As the two cars compromising the caravan were making their way to John Day, they were pulled over at the first roadblock. At first, neither side did anything. In what could be described as a silent standoff, the occupants of the vehicles were not given any instructions. No law enforcement approached the vehicles. They were never told to exit the vehicle, whatever. Finally, in an attempt to show peaceful intent, Ryan Payne put both hands out of the truck through the open window to show he was not armed. And he was promptly shot at with a bullet, striking metal of the truck between the window and the mirror.
At that point, the driver of the first vehicle, Lavoy Finicum, made a fateful decision to escape the gunfire and reach the protection of the sheriff waiting for them at John Day. Okay, so they're pulled over, they're surrounded by snipers, they got the laser dots all over them. They got their hands out the window to show they're not armed. They don't have any nefarious intent here. And what happens? Bang, 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 they start getting shot at. Would you just sit there? No, you'd hit the gas pedal and get the hell out of there. That's what I would do. Would you just sit there? So Finnegan's whole mindset here is we got to get to the other county for the protection of this constitutional sheriff. Let's take it from there. Upon reaching the second roadblock, Finnegan attempted to swerve to the side of the road, and the truck that became stuck in a snowbank. According to Cox, Finnegan exited the vehicle with both hands up and said loudly, "We have women in the car, don't shoot." According to Cox in her account, which is also backed up by Victoria's shop, folks, these two women made separate independent statements, and they match precisely. Finicum had his hands in the air as he faced the FBI agents who were stationed in the trees and said, "We are going to the sheriff. Let us just blah, blah, blah." He's trying to explain to them where they're going. Of course, they already knew where they were going. They knew their route. That's why there was an ambush waiting for them. He said this at all times with his hands in the air. Finnegan was then shot upon exiting the car several times, including at least 2 in the back, and was shot again repeatedly while he was lying in the snow dying. Immediately, the occupants had red lasers on their bodies as they scurried for the cover of the truck. Immediately after Finnegan was killed, the truck came under heavy fire. No orders were ever issued to the occupants, and as it was the first roadblock, firing bullets at the occupants of the truck was the first order of business of the day. Cox believes that the vehicle was struck at least over 100 times. Both women were hysterically screaming to please stop shooting as the 2 women were begging for their lives. This entire event, complete with the 2 roadblocks, unprovoked gunfire, and FBI agents in the trees, could only be described as an Old West ambush. With no movement in the truck, and after firing well over 100 rounds, the FBI finally issued its first order to surrender. They ordered the male occupants out of the vehicle, followed by the females. I had multiple law enforcement personnel write to me and express shock and horror after they viewed the FBI, never attempting to check the status of Finnegan. Of course they didn't. When he was laying there still in the snow, dead with his hands up, they come up and put 3 more bullets in him, according to witnesses. So my friends, I can't go on with this whole thing for the sake of time, but what have we known so